Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tian Wei, host and moderator from China Global Television. Great pleasure to be here in the afternoon to talk about work in the age of robot. Last time I checked, I'm still a human being. I could bleed, I have a heart, and I made a lot of mistakes when I was really little, but I enjoyed every minute of it, no regrets. But the world has changed, because now whenever you apply for a job, the one sitting at the other end of the table usually would think very hard how much value he or she would add every hour to our company or to our work than, let's just say, a worker in China, no, not China anymore, maybe in Vietnam, or a robot. So today is extremely interesting because sitting beside me is a professor who has won the Nobel Prize for his research about labor. And yet today, he's going to help us understand about robots, I guess, right, Professor? So before we let Professor Pissarides to present his speech about the age of robots, let me just humbly introduce him a little bit about what he has done. Sir Christopher Pissarides is a professor of economics and political science with the London School of Economics. His research focus, 3 areas: labor, economic growth, and also economic policy. He has been awarded with the Nobel Prize because of his contribution to the theories of search fictions, how to do that, and also microeconomics, particularly research about jobs and structural reform. Don't we need you in China, Professor? We have a lot of structural reform issues going on right now. So now China needs to create about 11 million jobs this year. Over the past 4 years, 15 million jobs every year. That's at least according to the Premier's latest statement in the annual press conference. So jobs, jobs, and jobs. What does that mean? However, in the age of robots, how things are being totally reshaped. So ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, let's put our hands together to welcome Professor Pissarides to present to us the age of robot.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction, for the chance to talk to you about this. Well, you heard a lot in this forum. I went to at least 2 meetings before that they talked about globalization and the impact of globalization in labor markets and how we somehow mismanaged globalization when it hit the industrial world labor markets. In fact, my topic today has many similarities with what you heard about globalization. What I'm going to talk about is technology and how the technology impact the labor market. When I write about robots, of course, the technological revolutions taking place now involve artificial intelligence, robotics, and everything. They still haven't been introduced on a big scale, but the rate of growth of their use in the labor market is such that we need to know beforehand what impact they will have on the labor market and what action to take, if for no other reason, just to avoid the mistakes that were made about globalization, so to avoid getting groups of workers or political groups arguing against automation, which you already see, in fact, to some extent, if you think of how many countries are not allowing Uber, for example, to operate in them. It's something very similar to what I'm going to say. So my emphasis is going to be the labor market, and I'm going to describe to you first what technology does to employment, and then talk more specifically about what automation and artificial intelligence might do to employment. Now, following on the terminology that I believe was introduced by Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, if not introduced, popularized through meetings of the World Economic Forum. What we're going through is what was the fourth industrial revolution. It's a 21st century phenomenon, and it's based on the internet, on new digital technologies that lead to artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, where machines communicate with each other, 3D printing, which is already being used even in aircraft manufacture. And it's taking over many manufacturing processes, but also a lot of service sectors are introducing and being affected. It's very closely related to the concept of 4.0 in Germany, and closely connected to the Made in China 2025 that was introduced here 2 years ago by Prime Minister Li Keqiang. Now, very briefly, why is this the fourth industrial revolution? Well, we had three before, and in all cases, jobs have been replaced by new technology. You could say that the first industrial revolution is the one that took place in England. It was based on the steam engine. It replaced all the cottage industry. It improved communications. It replaced mainly skilled workers, skilled craftsmen, that were replaced by factory work done with machines and unskilled labor. The second industrial revolution came late 19th century. It was based on electricity, mass production, the assembly line, and this was the one that created most jobs. It was the one that led to the mass manufacture of electrical appliances for the home and everywhere else. It did replace many jobs, but the jobs they replaced were mainly unskilled jobs. In the beginning of the 20th century, almost every middle-class home, at least we know in the United States from data, but also in Britain from data, employed 3 or 4 domestic assistants. They did the cleaning, the washing, the cooking. Well, come the domestic appliances, at best they had one at that time. Now they're coming back, but for different reasons. So that kind of unskilled job was destroyed. Now the third industrial revolution, in this terminology, was based on computerization and digitalization. It started in the 1960s. And it led to ICT, information communication technology. Again, it led to mass destruction of jobs. Well, it led to destruction of jobs. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more because it's very closely related with robotics. The claim about the impact of computers on jobs is that it destroys routine jobs. Computers don't think in the way that robots would think later on, but they can do routine tasks when they're programmed to do them. So they can do basic typing, for example. You can use the internet and computers to book your airline flights, that kind of thing. So the jobs they replace, they are not unskilled jobs of the kind that the second industrial revolution replaced through electrical machinery and electrical appliances, but they are more jobs in the mid-range of the skills distribution. And a very good example of that for those who are at universities, even when I started at the university in the 1970s, we very clearly had 3 classes of jobs. It was the academic staff that was, say, if you like, at the top of the skills distribution. Then it was all the administrative staff below, the typists, the administrators, the people doing the filing, and so on, the personal assistants. And then it was the bottom of the skills distribution, which was mainly the cleaners and the janitors and the repair people, the security people. But if you look at the university now, the one section of these 3 types of jobs that shrunk is the middle one. Academic staff is ever growing. The cleaners and janitors and security people are still there working, but the administrative section has shrunk a lot because we use computers now, we do digital filing, we don't need the filers with paper, we do our own typing because we have these amazing machines in our offices, we carry them with us. And it's a good example of how computers destroy jobs in the middle of the distribution, right at the top or the bottom. Now this is continuing, and there are claims that it could destroy another close to 50% of jobs, at least in the United States over the next years. I think those are vastly exaggerated. They're based on tasks, how many tasks could potentially be replaced by computers, but of course you don't have one task for each job. People do a lot of tasks and they change within their job description as well. but even conservative estimates say that we could see something like 10% of jobs being destroyed in industrial countries still over the next 10 to 20 years. Now, there's no doubt in most people's minds that robotics and artificial intelligence will destroy different kinds of jobs and possibly more jobs. And the question I'm going to address is what kind of jobs will it destroy and what can we do about it? Now, in parallel to the number of jobs, something I'm not going to discuss that much because of absence of time, but I just mentioned it, is that there are implications for inequality. And it's fairly obvious if you think of the university example I used with you before, in the sense that when you introduce computers in the market, then the bottom part of the distribution, wages in the bottom part of the distribution, skills distribution will stagnate because it's not complementary to computers. You know, they keep their jobs because computers cannot do the job of a security person or a cleaner, but their productivity will not rise because they use computers. The middle part, on the other hand, will suffer because they're losing jobs. You know, they're getting negative hits in their labor market, so wages maybe will fall, and the upper part will gain because they use computers. They are complementary to computerization, and therefore you have an increase in inequality in that high wages rise further by the introduction of computers, middle wages possibly fall, and low wages stagnate. I think it's related to what was called this morning the elephant chart, something about wages. And that's the main reason for the rise in wage inequality since the early 1980s. And if the introduction of computers is continuing, then we might see more of that taking place unless we do something about it. And we should do something about it, as you just heard people talk about inequality, so let me not say more. Now, what can we do about jobs now rather than inequality? Well, when we're talking about computers and the internet, it's very simple to say what we can do. You know, learn how to use computers, choose a skill that is complementary to computers, and start up a business or get a job in an office that uses computers. It's not too difficult, at least in principle, to see what's being done. You know, entrepreneurial activity is rewarded. Of course, you do need the right institutional environment, you need top quality education, lots of R&D, but that will cope with job creation. There shouldn't be any serious repercussions in labor markets from the introduction of computers. Now, what about R&D? I just thought I'd throw this chart in, which is really revealing in that sense. If you see the distribution of R&D done by industry across the OECD and some other countries, you can see that the countries that are doing most R&D are the ones that have been the most successful in the age of computers. There's the Republic of Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, then come the USA, China, and then at the bottom and at the other end is mainly Southern Europe, Mexico, Romania, Chile. Well, forget Luxembourg, it's just it's a country of European Union citizens. There's Greece, Russia, Poland, Slovakia, and you can see that is exactly what's happening now. So in a sense, if you want to see successes and failures in the computer age, just look at who is doing the R&D and you got your answer. Well, this is something put there because of the Chinese interest, because of the location. You can see that the countries that China considers its biggest competitors in the new industry, the China industry 2025, you know, made in China, they are all doing more R&D than China is doing. We did have, in fact, the Deputy Minister this morning saying that R&D spending in China is increasing very fast and very quickly is going to overtake the competitors. He didn't quite show this graph, but that's obviously what we have in mind. China does need to increase its R&D if it's going to catch up, especially with Germany and Japan that is singled out as the main countries that it wants to follow in the age of robots. I mean, South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, as you all know, is the miracle country of the post-war era, where it started in 1950 and where it is now with its industry, computerization, digitalization, and so on. And you can see why it's spending a lot more on R&D than the other countries. Okay, let me then move on specifically to talking about robots. Now, is job loss going to be different from the one we've seen in the computer age? Well, the answer is that it is going to be different, because robots will not replace just routine jobs. They could potentially replace thinking jobs. You know, you could have robots that think and respond to people, you know, respond to orders and respond to needs. You know, machines could communicate with each other. A good example, only because it's already being introduced and we all know about it, is autonomous cars, ones that drive without any assistant or driver. They're replacing skilled drivers who think about what road to take, how to avoid traffic, how to avoid accidents. Well, they've already been introduced in London, for example, in the Google autonomous car. And no one seems to be worried about it or thinking about it, except for taxi drivers, I guess. But it's not causing accidents. It's quite interesting that when they ask people, do they think it's a good idea, they say, yes, it's an excellent idea to have driverless cars that don't cause accidents. And then they say, well, would you trust them to take your child to work every morning and bring them back? And something like 90% say no. I wouldn't. So obviously there is a lot of uncertainty about what they can do. For sure, I wouldn't trust my child to sit in a car alone without a driver and press a button that say go to such and such an address and drop him to school. You know. 3D printing is by no means routine. You know, there's a lot of intelligent construction going there, and the same goes on there that robots would obviously replace jobs that are done by skilled workers. Now, does that mean that mass job destruction? That there will be mass job destruction, there will be no jobs to do, even for people who have university education and are highly skilled. You know, that's this sort of doomsday scenario, and some people at the World Economic Forum that discussed that made this main theme 2 years ago. They claimed that yes, it will be done. And in fact, when you look at the literature, you found that almost everything is anticipated, was anticipated at some point or other. In fact, I didn't say, well, you probably all know who was the first author who anticipated the construction of a robot that kicks its boss out of work. And that was Mary Shelley in Frankenstein, which was written in 1820 or thereabouts. You know, that the scientists became so obsessed with constructing a machine that could walk and behave like a human being, and as soon as he achieved his dream, he found himself out of a job, as well as out of a life, I guess. But it was supposed to be science fiction. In fact, this is what we're seeing now happening. Now, with respect to machines, with respect to no jobs being left to do, the person who wrote about it actually, in passing on this, it was John Maynard Keynes, where it's not the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last, where I go back to Keynes to get some ideas about economists telling about what we should be doing. Where in 1931 actually, I think, he wrote an essay called Economic Opportunities for Our Grandchildren. And he said that by the age of our grandchildren, machines will be doing all the work that we are doing, and the best way to deal with it, to avoid unemployment, was to share the work out more equally. And he threw in a remark that said, sharing the work means that each one of us could be doing 15 hours a week, and that would be enough, and the rest of the time we can take as leisure. Now, if that's the case, then how do we ensure there is no inequality, that situation is sustainable? Well, the obvious answer is that each one of us owns one robot. We send our robot to work, earns income, and brings it to us. And it's quite interesting that I don't know if Bill Gates had this in mind when recently he said that the work of robots should be taxed like the work of humans. If each one of us owns a robot and sends it to work and we sit back and enjoy life, then we might as well impose the tax at the level of the robot than the level of the individual, which I think, by the way, is a bad idea, because robots are very mobile, unlike people. They have no attachment to any particular location. Tax them here and then move there. Now, it's certainly the case that Keynes was right to a large extent, that the introduction of robots will reduce hours of work. So there will be net job destruction. We see this already, that countries with lower productivity work longer hours, and countries that have already introduced new technology and have become more productive work less. We shouldn't think of that, though, as a kind of doomsday scenario, as I mentioned before. Oh my God, there will be no work done. We should think of it as people taking part of the gains from trade, from the introduction of new technology, as leisure time. You know, as I think it was Joe Stiglitz who was saying that some American CEOs have become so obscenely rich that they don't know how to spend their money. Well, rather than take your reward as money and work day and night, including weekends, and then you have so much money you don't know how to spend it. Work less and take time off. Share out what you get from the introduction of new technology, and this is what we're seeing happening in the world, with very minor exceptions. In fact, the country has championed that approach. You'd be surprised to hear, is Germany. If you look at the OECD, which country works the fewest hours of work, that's Germany. It's not Greece, despite what you may have heard in the press. In fact, Greeks work very long hours. You see Greeks to the right, fourth down from highest. Mexicans work longest. I'm still trying to figure out which country has the acronym CSR. I thought Croatia, but it cannot be. There's no S in Croatia, but it's one. And then comes, well, South Korea is always the exception, that they have the new technology, they have the high productivity, and they also have the long hours of work. I guess on average their productivity is not so high, but then come Greece, Chile, Russia. We work very long hours despite the high unemployment. Whereas at the other end, you have Germany, Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, France, of course, everyone talks about. So it's the countries that are most innovative in dealing with inequality, and they're most innovative in introducing new technology that work fewest hours. And you can see a fairly good correlation, in fact, between hourly productivity and hours of work across all those countries, the OECD. In fact, the high correlation surprised me, in fact, that it was so close. Now, that's what we might call job sharing, but we are in the grandchild generation of Keynes. He could have been my grandfather, given when he was born. No, actually, he could have been my great-grandfather. In fact, I recently met the great-grandchild of Keynes, and she's called Keynes, and she's an economist. If I were her, I would have changed my name. But anyway, she said she always has difficulties introducing herself as Miss Keynes, the economist. But she's a very good economist too. Now, but hours are not down to 15. Even in Germany, they are down to 26 hours of work. There is more work doing than what was anticipated. Now, of course, don't think that Keynes did a very careful study of what hours of work would be, just through the remark like that. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is that there is job creation as well taking place. And job creation, of course, is taking place in sectors that cannot be automated. So, in addition to, and there are new sectors, there are new jobs, net new job creation in those sectors. So you might say that the gains from new technology and the gains from the introduction of robots is partly taken as more leisure, as I showed just a minute ago, and part is the demand for these new services that are provided by human beings and which in the past we didn't take because we couldn't afford. And those services are mainly in these sectors. They're in health and care, education, the hospitality industry, real estate management, household services, personal services. Now, why am I saying that these are services that we didn't used to take before? Well, just think about it. I mean, these are sectors that have had net job creation, and I think the more robots we introduce into industry, the more jobs we're going to get into these sectors here. Well, why is that? Well, take them all one by one. I have the main ones, I think, with some more words here. These are basically services that were either provided at home before or not provided at all. And they're services that wealthy, aging societies, like what we're having now in the countries that are introducing robots, will want. You know, take health and care. If you're not wealthy and you get sick, what do? You stay at home, you complain, you hope that it's going to go away. You don't go and spend a fortune into professional care and a doctor unless you get really seriously ill. If you are a little bit older and you've got a lot of money and you feel like that, you're not going to stay home and feel miserable. You're going to call a doctor from day one or a nurse to look after you. So you're creating a lot of jobs in that way, especially as we are having the aging societies. Take the leisure industry. I just said that the impact of the robots would be that we're going to take more leisure. Well, we're going to need leisure workers. We're not going to enjoy ourselves by going to a restaurant and being served by a robot. You want to have a person, you want to complain if the food is not to your liking, you want to change your mind. How are you going to communicate with robots like that? Take household services. Again, if we don't have enough money and all that, we might be doing our own cleaning at home, our own cooking, staying, our own childcare and all that. But if you have increases in productivity, you're more wealthy because of the introduction of these technologies, then you create a job, you get someone to do all these things for you. And it's a trend that we have observed in a big way. So all these sectors will create jobs. Excuse me. And therefore there is going to be net job creation, there is going to be work sharing with the jobs that we're going to have. In other words, we're not going to replace all the jobs, but we're going to replace a substantial number in these labor-intensive sectors. Now, what implications does that for higher education? When new technology comes from R&D, as I said, and the startups, lots of startups are building on new ideas, existing large companies need to invest, to invent and reinvent to stay ahead, to be more competitive. And therefore, it's important that we increase top-level, good quality education in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Management skills are very important in how you manage a successful company, computer skills. You need the combination. I mean, all modern theories of the firm tell you that a successful firm is one that combines good technical education, good research, with good management abilities. And although top United States universities, maybe some of the top British universities do these things, if you look at university performance across the world in this kind of training, it's nowhere near what would be required to have to succeed in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the other very important implication about education is that a lot of the new jobs that I described are jobs that require person-to-person skills. They're skills where you communicate with other people. You don't work alone in an office. You know, the leisure industry I showed is a primary example. The health and care industry is a primary example. And most of the unskilled people, those who don't go into university, will get this kind of job. Now, if you look at what training schools give to children, this kind of training is almost completely absent. You know, how do you provide a service that involves communication with other people? You know, how do you serve other people? So this is another change, it's almost like a structural change that has to come into the school curriculum this one, not higher level university. You need to develop social skills, you need to learn some psychology, some language skills, and all these need to be learned in high school. Of course, you do need to have some basic knowledge of sciences and so forth, and geography and history, but these skills are completely absent. What you see in the world is completely absent from our current education systems. So to conclude, the fourth industrial revolution will destroy many jobs, will create inequalities. Inequality are left to one side. Ours will work will fall, and we should take more leisure. New jobs will be created in labor-intensive sectors, and we do need to have some changes in the education system and some production by government against new type of skills that will come into through robotics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pissarides, for even leaving me with one more extra minute. Thank you. May I begin by saying, I learned earlier that thought without learning is labor lost. Without learning is labor lost. Learning without thought is perilous. So I guess the process that you have helped us through this speech is both a learning and a thinking process, so thank you very much. But I want to begin by asking a direct question. I tried to buy a robot yesterday in order to come up with the best question for you, but I failed. So I'll just ask a question on my own. China set its goal, a very pragmatic question, 6.5% GDP growth rate. What does that mean? Is there a robot waiting for us? Okay, so are robots preventing China from getting to 6.5%, or the other way around?
I see, I misunderstood the time. I thought that the time applied only to me, not including the question. That's why. I'm sorry. Say that again, are robots going for the 6.5%?
For or against that?
It's, no, in terms of the growth, as it's written in the plans, and including the Made in China 2025 plan, robots are an essential component of that in achieving the 6.5%. Because if you see where growth is going to come to in the plan, it's going to come to 10 manufacturing sectors where emphasis will be given. The first sector, and they're all high technology sectors, and the first one is robotics. So it's absolutely essential. What the plan doesn't mention very much is what's happening to labor markets and how we should deal with labor markets, because it talks about the jobs that will be created in those manufacturing sectors, but it doesn't talk about the jobs that will be destroyed. And there's no doubt that automation will destroy industry jobs. The total employment in industry in China following this plan would be less than what it is today. There's no doubt about that. And it would be futile to try and bring these jobs back from wherever they go, maybe Vietnam, maybe Cambodia, who knows. It's best to leave it and then emphasize the other aspects I talked about of job creation, reduce hours of work, make these necessary structural reforms in the service sector of the economy, so as to introduce jobs that need to have a higher level of respectability and performance, which is lacking in China, in fact.
Yeah, not just China, elsewhere in the world as well. We see a phenomenon that the capability of governance has not really catch up with the speed of change for the technology. With such a phenomenon in mind, we also see countries asking so-called their own companies, mainly the companies that are headquarters in certain countries, to go back and create their so-called manufacturing centers and create jobs, even though each of those jobs would cost tremendous. As a result, Professor Pissarides, what would that mean eventually for the implementation of the technologies of robots worldwide?
Well, you see, there are two aspects to encouraging your successful companies to go back. One of them is that you have many successes that are located to other countries simply to avoid tax. Not that they create any jobs or doing manufacturing. And we had a very good example this morning from Joe Stiglitz, who said Google is a Cayman Island company. Now, obviously, if you find a way of making them go back to the United States, I don't think it will have a big impact on their job creation or on the introduction of new technology.
Why not?
They'll carry on. Because they're so profitable anyway, they're making less profit, but it will still be a lot of profit. I mean, they essentially have monopoly power through the skills that they acquired. And that's the best way to make sure that you're successful as a digital company. Find a way of doing things that no one has thought about, that you dominate the market, and you essentially have monopoly power without the legal barriers to monopoly power. Now, there are, however, other companies that go and locate overseas where they take their production lines overseas mainly because costs are lower, labor costs, maybe land costs are lower. Those, it would be a mistake to try and bring them back into your country, and it would be counterproductive for the introduction of robots and new technology. Advanced industrial countries that are losing this kind of company because they had the wage rises should continue giving those wage rises, should continue giving better training to their workers, and should be introducing the new technology so that they become the owners of the robots. And the jobs that are low down the skills distribution can be done by countries that will benefit enormously from doing those jobs, which now China wouldn't qualify for that because wages have already increased and they are increasing here. The countries that are currently benefiting from that are still Southeast Asian countries, but there is Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines. It's that kind of location. It's for everyone's benefit for those to remain there.
As I said earlier, Professor, I was trying to let the robot to come up with the best questions for you today, but I failed to find a capable one yet for my job at this point. But I'm sure I can borrow the help from our audience who are much more talented and intelligent than I am in the area we are talking about today. So if you have a question or two, do raise your hand. Our colleague will bring microphone to you. Gentleman over there. We would like to restrain ourselves from a 5-minute commentary to go and ask a question. Thank you so much, sir. Go ahead.
Chris, thank you very much indeed for your talk. You make an implicit assumption that the ownership of the robots is in the country where they're operating. But one of the problems with things like Google or Uber is that a lot of the value might be sucked out of the country due to being attributed to the intellectual property. Does that rather undermine the analysis that the robot owners will be able to get richer and create jobs if the ownership is actually located legally in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or indeed California?
Well, of course, where the jobs will be created is where they spend the money. So if they're located, if their property rights are located in Bermuda or Cayman Islands, actually Google is Bermuda, not Cayman Islands, now that you mentioned. If it's located there and then they're spending the money in California, the service job creation will be in California because that's what matters. The whole location of property rights and all that depends, well, partly in what kind of law they have, if it's English law or German law, whatever, or their local law, but mainly through the taxation implications. So, but that's a completely different issue from the one I'm saying. Like as I said before, the shareholders of Google maybe benefit more now because they don't pay as much tax as they would have paid if they were located in California. But in some sense, this might even benefit California. They have more money to spend in their local area on these services. If they pay more tax, of course, they will benefit the whole of the United States more because it will be federal tax, and we know there is huge redistribution in the United States, across states, from tax.
Okay, another question over there.
Professor, you mentioned the robot and automation will reduce job and even lead to the reduced working hours. Probably you think it's good for human being or more time to use. But do you think it is also challenging for human being? Since without job, even infinite job working time, where is the value of human being? Do you think it's a challenge? So you see, there are a lot of people in the world without job, for age, for some special race in some countries. There are a lot of problems for them. Do you think it's a challenge? Thank you.
Well, that's a failure of the economy if it bunches employment into small numbers and then keeps many more unemployed. And it's where Germany and Netherlands succeeded, in that Germany and Netherlands have the smallest number of hours of work in the industrial world, but they also have the lowest unemployment rates. In fact, they have lower unemployment rates than ever in their history in the case of Germany, at least since unification in 1990. So just think about it. It's the smallest number of smaller total number of hours of work per capita, the lowest unemployment rates. That's through a very successful system of job sharing, which was partly helped by taxation changes in the last 10 to 15 years following the reforms of Schroeder between 2002 and 2005, and the response to the recession in 2008 after the collapse of Lehman. In a country like Greece, you have a complete failure on at least two counts. One is in the introduction of technology, which they haven't done. It's an extremely inefficient industry. And the other one is in so much protection to jobs that they had at least before the crisis, that anyone getting a job would just hold onto that job for life because it's so valuable. Because if you lose it, if you leave it and lose it, you have great difficulty taking it back again. So you have a complete mismatch of skills and jobs. In that, because I happened to get a job somewhere 30 years ago, that's still the job I'm having, and it's the one I'm going to retire with, and I'm going to get a good pension from this job, and I don't want to risk anything else. Well, that's a failure of a labor market. It's a very rigid labor market that fails. So now young people come onto the labor market, they cannot get jobs because they're being held by those who have them. You're not creating new because you have the macro problems, and therefore you have 50% unemployment of young people, of those who stay in the country at least, because you have many, many more leaving the country, and if they all stay, then unemployment would be even more than 50%. So it's a failed economy for many reasons. I mean, I'm using it as an example. There are other economies like that, but because I'm of Greek origin, I can criticize it as much as I want. The foreigners cannot criticize it.
Okay. Any other question? Sir, over there.
Yes, thank you, Tian. Could we think about the context of job loss in the developing world, particularly sort of middle income, lower income countries, beyond those that may have knowledge and capital to move in the direction that you're suggesting would be necessary for most economies? What is your perspective?
Sorry, did you say developing?
Developing country, you say.
In emerging countries.
Well, middle income and lower income. And so I'm not talking about India. I'm talking about other countries.
Well, the focus, of course, of what I was saying was the high-income countries, because I use the OECD always for examples. But if you think of a country like China as being, say, a fast-growing middle-income, 3 or 4 years ago, when I looked per capita incomes in China were exactly 100% of middle-income countries. Now they might be a little bit higher. It needs to start thinking about job loss in industry and introduction of new technology, because it needs to remain competitive in an international context. Globalization, the trade has benefited them enormously. If trade is going to continue benefiting them, that's the kind of trade that they have a chance of succeeding in high technology trade, not in low cost, low labor. But if you look at the other countries coming up now, especially if you go to Africa, for example, then I don't think what I've been talking about is what needs to be worrying them now. Because there is still a big labor reserve, which is in agriculture, that needs to be, there is still literacy might be okay at school level, but not beyond that. There is that labor that needs to be brought first into the service sector and the industrial sector. Wages are very low. That's where they need to put their emphasis, not in job loss due to automation, more given that all this job destruction that is taking place in these rich industrial countries through automation, how could those countries step in and take advantage by supplying them the low-cost, low-skill content manufacturing that China has done so successfully through the 90s and 2000s?
I guess
there is a kind of differentiation.
Yes, indeed. Great question, by the way. Final question coming from the audience. Any? Okay, may I just ask a follow-up about that gentleman's question? You talk about developed economies. There are differences in using robots and technology. Will the possibility having developing countries not necessarily use robots, but still having enough labor, low-cost labor to succeed, creating furthermore digital divide in our world? And what would that mean overall in the near future?
Yeah, well, that's a risk that needs to be avoided, that we create an even bigger divide and even bigger inequality between countries that adopt digital technology and those that don't. So it's something that you do step by step. You know, you don't say, oh no, I'm not even going to look at digital technologies, and then suddenly you say you have now passed the threshold and I'm going to do it. You should do it step by step, but in terms of policy priorities, which is what I was referring to there, you know, what should policymakers prioritize in those countries? What they should prioritize is urbanization, building cities that will function, creating the environment for job creation in the traditional service sector and industrial sector, and then worry about that. In fact, just in the final minute, a country where you do see, in fact, the combination of these two forces is India. I mean, India at the same time is concerned about urbanization and creating the traditional jobs, but at the same time, it does have its own Silicon Valley, effectively. I don't know how to write it, I'm not for us. And it does produce every now and then digital technology products that are high and that have high content of digital technologies. And what we are seeing there is a gradual transition to this technology, but it's still a long way behind. Of course, it still has low wages and can still benefit enormously from trade in low-cost, labor-intensive goods.
Thank you so much, Professor. Sir Christopher Pissarides. Everything probably can be replaced by robots, but not Nobel laureates. They usually bring us a lot of wisdom and insights. Thank you so much.
We shall fight.
We shall fight, yes indeed. In the age of robots. Thank you, Professor Pissarides, for giving us insights about where our future likely to be. Thank you.